What's going on YouTube? My name is Ron King back again with another video. As always, if you enjoy the content, please leave a like on the video, leave some comments below, and also leave some feedback. I'd like to know what you guys think about the video, if you liked it, if you didn't like it, and what else you'd like to see on the channel. Also, please subscribe for related business content. Now, today we're going to be looking at an article that discusses the argument for reparations for Black people in America today. One of my subscribers had actually sent me this article, and he wanted me to give my thoughts on it. So shout out to Luke Campbell for sending me the content. I do appreciate it. But without further ado, we'll get right into it. So the title of the article is Reparations for Slavery Are the Only Way to Fix America's Racial Wealth Disparities. And this article is by Robert L. Johnson. And then it says here, slavery, Jim Crow laws, and racial discrimination were a wealth transfer from African Americans to white people. It's time to make amends and give it back. All right. So we'll get right into the article. We know there are starkly different economic realities for Black and white Americans in this country, and solutions have not met those realities. I definitely agree with that. Uh, African American families lag far behind white Americans in all categories of wealth. More than 73% of white Americans own homes, while only 44% of African Americans do. The median income of a white American family, is more than double than that of an African American family. So I wanted to pause right there and break that down a little bit. So that's a 29% disparity in uh, house ownership, in home ownership, which is pretty alarming, but it is to be expected the way that Black people have been marginalized in this country. And that's why I'm very adamant about closing the racial wealth gap on this channel, because I think that it is important that we do our best to do that. And also, the median income is more than double for white families and Black families. I think that's mostly due to the fact that most Black families only have a single parent. A single parent. Most of the time, it's a mother, and she has to support her kids and work and basically be Superman. And there's no, father in the family to provide as well and provide guidance to children. So that's a problem within itself. But we'll go ahead and move on. So, white Americans graduate from college at a higher rate than African Americans, which affects African Americans' ability to gain wealth, given that with a college degree, you're more likely to get a better paying job. This is definitely true. I definitely agree that education is the key to social mobility. However, it's not the only way. It's not the only way. Entrepreneurship is definitely another way. And people that say you can go to the college to learn how to start a business, they don't know what they're talking about, because basically entrepreneurship, you need to learn by experience. You need to get your hands dirty. You need to go out there and fail. You need to go out there and get your hands dirty and try to come up with something. Just work, work, work until something works out. And that's basically the only way you're going to get better at it. So moving on, African Americans also lag way behind white Americans in savings for retirement and investments in the stock market. And this has to do with a mindset that white people have developed versus what we have as a mindset as Black people. I think that Black people, they usually don't think long term with their money. That's, generally. And that's something that I would like to see change in the Black community. I would like to see young Black people investing their money instead of spending it on Jordans or clothes or a chain, or just vain things that don't really mean anything, just things to feed your ego and make you feel good. It's not a very good way to spend money. So moving on, When you see all the lagging statistics between blacks and whites, you must ask yourself why. All right? You must ask why. That's true. It is not that whites are more intelligent, morally superior, or more industrious than Black Americans, which are the primary sociological attributes that cause people to succeed in life. Right, I would agree. I definitely don't think that white people are more intelligent or superior or anything like that. I think society is definitely set up in a way where it makes Black people think that way or conditions them to think that white people might be more intelligent or morally superior, but they're really not. We need to get out of that complex and notice who we really are. We are strong Black people, and we are very smart, very resourceful, and we need to use our intellect to our advantage. Now, the article goes on to say African Americans are very industrious. They disproportionately work at some of the toughest and least rewarding jobs in the country. It is not a lack of morality, as African Americans have a deep moral fiber. They firmly believe in traditional Judeo Christian morality and can be more conservative than whites in many ways. I half agree with that statement. I think Black people are very religious, and that's a good thing. However, I wouldn't say that they can be more conservative than whites in many ways. I think that's a bit of a reach. I I'm pretty sure that the overwhelming majority of Black people are basically married to the Democratic Party, and when they basically haven't done that much to earn our vote, if I'm being completely honest, I think people just vote Democrat because they feel like they have to, because not even because of certain policies that will benefit us as Black people. I feel like we just vote that way because we've been conditioned to. But that's besides the point. I just wanted to bring that up. Not trying to turn this into a political video or anything like that, really. But let's keep going. So it's certainly not a lack of patriotism. African Americans are loyal to this country and have fought our wars when rights for which we were fighting for others were denied to us here. Okay. The only honest conclusion to the question of wealth and income disparity is simply that white Americans, due to the 200 plus years of slavery and systemic racism, had an unjust head start in wealth accumulation, income, and educational opportunities that were denied to Black Americans or African Americans and are still denied in many ways today. And then it goes on to say the Pernicus legacy of slavery is the primary factor in wealth disparity, racial animosity, and discrimination. Now, I do agree with this point mostly, but they use the wrong word here. Pernicus. So I looked at the word pernicus, and it means having a harmful effect, especially in a gradual or subtle way. The way that slavery has impacted the course of history, it wasn't gradual, it wasn't subtle at all. It was very abrupt, and it was very clear that this was going to be something that would basically limit and marginalize Black people for years to come, even after the abolishment of slavery. But let's continue here. So when you accept that conclusion, the only thing left is to admit and acknowledge that the Pernicus legacy of slavery is the primary factor in the. All right, it's the same sentence. And the system of slavery and its aftermath not only denied African Americans the right to accumulate any kind of wealth, but even more detrimental to the human spirit, it convinced Black people that they were never intended to be economically and socially equal to white Americans. African Americans were left to believe that for them, the American dream in a nation founded on capitalism and rule of law was nothing but a cruel hoax. Now, this is deep. This is very deep. It speaks to the psychological conditioning, like I was talking about earlier, of Black people not believing that they can become rich, not believing that they can be socially equal to white Americans, because it's kind of been conditioned into the black community for years and years and years. And so if you tell somebody something enough times, they'll believe it. So that's basically what's happened. So, and that's what kind of why, I am on this platform. I would like to document my growth and progression, and so that when I get to become, wealthy, I do plan to be wealthy. I can show people that, you don't need to be an athlete, you don't need to be an entertainer, in order to become wealthy as a black person, right? You don't need to do that. You can do it the right way. You don't have to do it illegally. You don't have to sell drugs. You can do it in a way that you can be proud of. And you don't even have to be like a one in a million. You don't have to be LeBron James. So that's something that is very important to me, as far as just highlighting the fact that we as black people can advance economically, even if we're not a rapper or a baller, entertainer, anything like that. Okay, so Bob Johnson is calling for reparations here. So he says, I'm calling for reparations and asking for two things. First, that white Americans recognize that reparations is a payment to atone for the largest illegal wealth transfer in this nation's history. And second, to understand that the phrases equal justice and economic equality will ring hollow to black Americans until they are made whole. Now, this is an interesting point, but I don't fully agree with it, right? I don't fully agree with it. I do agree with the fact that um, economic equality, that phrase will ring hollow in Black Americans' heads until basically we're economically equal, right? However, I don't think that we should try and rely on the government to provide us with reparations, because number one, if they were going to provide reparations, they would have done it already. It's been 200 plus years since the abolishment of slavery, and it's been a topic of discussion for a very long time. So I don't know what people think, why people think now that, after all this time, now we're gonna get reparations. I don't. I just don't see it. I don't think it's likely. I don't think it's going to happen, and I don't think it's something that we should bank on. I think that we need to empower ourselves. You know, we need to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps, and not taking away from systematic racism. We have to acknowledge that it happened, yes, but we need to think about solutions instead of focusing on problems. If we're going to close this wealth gap, you know, it, I believe that if you're not actively doing something to close the wealth gap, you shouldn't be talking about it. You shouldn't be complaining, because I'm very solutions oriented. I believe that you need to, if no one else is going to do it for you, you need to do it for yourself. Okay. And also, I wanted to bring up this reparations. It, I would say that the idea of it, I would say that it fosters a victim mentality, which is not good. And I would also say that it's kind of entitled as well. And let me explain why. So, we as black people need to understand that we did not build this country, right? Our ancestors did, okay? And before someone just chops up that clip and just ends it right where I said black people didn't build this country, I need y'all to take that with context, right? Our ancestors built the country. So if our ancestors built the country, what entitles us to reparations as black people 200 years later? Basically, what I'm saying is that if we ourselves didn't build this country, if we didn't suffer from having to go through slavery, yes, it was our ancestors, but it wasn't us directly. So why should we get the reparations that basically they should have got? And I think that's an important point to make. I think that's a point that people never really bring up. I don't think we should be entitled to something that really you know, should have went to our ancestors. My goal is not to discredit. My goal is not to undermine, the effects of slavery or anything like that. I think it's important to talk about all those things. I really do. But I think in terms of solutions, we need to think about how we can empower ourselves and not wait for people to do it for us. So let's go ahead and move on, finish out this article. So now, how do you implement this massive wealth transfer from white Americans back to black Americans? The only way to do this is to grant black people the right to damages in the form of direct cash payment so that they have financial assets to achieve economic equality with their white counterparts. Another thing I wanted to bring up is that, right, I'm sure that everyone received the stimulus check recently. Now, that stimulus check passed after a lot of fighting between the Senate, a lot of fighting within the legislative branch of government. And at the end of everything, we got about $600, right? Okay. So if it took that much just to get $600, right? $600 one time. I'm not sure how y'all expect all black people to get reparations, and especially in this amount here, they add up the total reparations to be $14 trillion. I don't know how y'all think they're gonna come up with that. They barely came up with $600, and y'all out here asking for 14 trillion. I just don't see it. You have to be realistic about these things. Sure, it might be an accurate assessment. It's probably very complicated. You have to figure out who was actually a descendant of enslaved people, which would take a lot of ancestry tests and all that stuff, and then you have to divide it up. It's very complicated. So just this whole process would take a lot of time and a lot of money. And so, okay, let's go ahead and finish out this thing. So the math goes like this: a typical African American person's net worth is 17,000, which, while the typical white American's worth is 170,000, which is a tenfold gap. You want to close the aforementioned gap in home ownership, 40% versus 70%. You also have to factor in the income gap, about 25%, the cost of education, the differences in savings and investment. To close all those gaps with payment over 30 years is going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of $357,000 per African American citizen. Multiply that by the 40 million individuals whose ancestors were enslaved, and you arrive at the amount of 14 trillion. Now, I think this is a pretty, it's a pretty great calculation here. The way they're able to break it down, it's actually brilliant. However, I'm not sure who expects 300,000, $350,000 to just show up in your bank account. Um, it's not gonna happen. It's not gonna happen. We barely got $600, and we have to fight really hard for that. I don't see anything close to $357,000 coming to every African American citizen whose ancestors were enslaved. And so, with that being said, we're going to have to pull up ourselves by our bootstraps. We can't wait for people to empower us. We have to empower ourselves. We have to make the right decisions. We have to be disciplined. We have to pool our resources. We need to open businesses that will flourish, open businesses that will add value to our communities. And from there, we can talk about reducing and eliminating the racial wealth gap in this country. So if you enjoy the content, please leave a like on the video, comment on the video, let me know your thoughts on this. I really would like to know what you think about the different ideas that I have explained in this video. And go ahead and subscribe to the channel for additional business related content. As always, my name is Ron King. Have a great day. Peace.